Tomorrow is Cinco de Mayo, a day that has traditionally been celebrated primarily by Mexican Americans. Though it has increasingly been celebrated by Americans of all cultural backgrounds. It's a day to enjoy stereotypical Mexican culture, much like St. Patrick's Day has become a day to celebrate stereotypical Irish culture. The day commemorates the Battle of Puebla on May 5th, 1862, when the Mexican army beat back an invading French army despite being outnumbered and outgunned. In the military history of Mexico, this victory was fairly inconsequential, but it stood as a moment of Mexican pride in being able to stand their ground against the French Empire. For Mexican Americans, the victory marks one of particular pride, because if the French had conquered Mexico in 1862, it is quite possible that they would then have joined with the Confederate States on the battlefield of the Civil War, and the Union would have lost that war. Today is May the 4th, the day that is known as Star Wars Day, because May the 4th be with you sounds a lot like May the Force be with you. On this day, all things Star Wars, from the first three movies, the late 70s and early 80s, to the Disney Plus television series of today, are celebrated by their fans. Now, none of these movies or shows are perfect, but there is an ongoing theme throughout them of the need to stand up for righteousness and the oppressed, even when the odds are against you and death is a very real consequence. And the theme of the possibility of redemption for anyone, no matter what they have done. And finally, yesterday, we as the Diocese of Western New York met together with the Diocese of Northwestern Pennsylvania and made the decision that moving forward, each diocese needs its own bishop. And I would note it was not a matter of clergy or laity, or Western New York or Northwestern Pennsylvania, who made this discernment, but rather all four groups came to the same conclusion. And with many feeling that the pastoral needs of both dioceses were suffering as energies were being directed towards trying to integrate two incompatible administrative systems. There were certainly those who were clear that they just wanted to go back to the way things were, and there were others who feared that if we choose our bishops separately, we may lose the good things that have come from the partnership, including the commission to dismantle racism, shared diaconal ministries along our rural border, and the relationships built. But for most, there seemed to be a sense of preserving the good of the partnership, and maybe even expanding that into relationships with other dioceses in both states, but also needing to find a bishop that can provide the right pastoral leadership within each diocese separately, and to focus energies on reimagining what it means to be a diocese in our very different legal contexts. I was pondering all of these events as I read both the reading from Acts and the Gospel today. In Acts, we have the story of Saul of Tarsus, a man who has facilitated the torture and murder of several members of the early Christian community, and was in the process of conducting a paramilitary roundup of Christians in Damascus when he fell off his high horse. Saul woke up changed, and in the course of a few days went from being the greatest oppressor of the church to its greatest evangelist. In the Gospel, we have the story of Jesus and the apostles, in particular, the fishermen. Now, these guys, Peter, Nathaniel, Thomas, James, and John, they have been with Jesus from the beginning of his ministry. They watched Jesus be crucified and died. Peter saw the empty tomb. They had gathered together in the upper room and seen Jesus alive again. Thomas had been given the chance to touch Jesus' hand and side and see where the nails and the spear had been driven. And yet, their next step is to go back to their nets, back to Galilee, and go back to fishing. And so, Jesus once again appears to them in the resurrection and makes them breakfast to eat together, and then commands them to feed his lambs, tend his sheep, and follow him. When I read the gospel and the story from Acts, I could not help but think, wow, Jesus, God, really knows how to pick them. Saul, or as he would be known, Paul, had the seminary education. If you had known poor Stephen, who was stoned to death at his behest, you would be hard-pressed to follow Paul. And the rest of them were likely borderline literate at best. Time and time again would lose their faith as soon as things became at all tenuous. By the wisdom of this world, the church should never have survived the first century. We should not be here. Yet, we are. We are here because these ordinary, imperfect people, these landless fishermen and this one zealot Pharisee who fell off his horse, banded together and brought liberation of mind and spirit to oppressed peoples throughout the Mediterranean world, down into Ethiopia, and along the Silk Road all the way to India. And the Mexicans should not have won that battle in Puebla, and yet they did, because they refused to stop fighting, even though all the odds were against them, and through their actions, they helped the North win the Civil War. And while it is fictional, the reason that Star Wars has become such a part of our culture is because it speaks over and over again to this truth, that it is only through the extraordinary actions of ordinary people that the world changes. And so, as we move together in faith with the people of Northwestern Pennsylvania and the rest of the Episcopal Church, I see in this moment a new hope. We all went into this experiment for the sake of the gospel, expecting that it might be a permanent partnership and that through it we could be a model for others across the church. Our experiment has provided insights for others as they have merged or partnered, and it has created relationships that are going to be important in ensuring a future for the Episcopal Church in both Western New York and Northwestern Pennsylvania. But in the end, we found that the differences in legal and administrative systems were just too great to really become blended. We gained data we did not expect. But this is part of the scientific method. The experiment was a success. It was just not the success we were expecting. And through it, both dioceses learned new insights into who we are, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are. And those insights are going to be crucial as each of us seeks to find our own new bishops, and as we seek to continue the mission of the church, to tend God's herd, to feed God's lambs, to follow after Christ, and as ordinary people, to bring extraordinary change to our world. Amen.